Gotta wait a minute till some folks join. If you guys are familiar with me and my crazy household, you will probably know that I will have multiple animals coming in and out as we do this. I've got my dog Royce right here. My cat Cora is over here. Our dog Anya is afraid of the phone tripod that I bought, so she may or may not join us. She keeps like popping her face in, looking around the door like, is it gone? Oh no, it's still here. Skittering back into the hallway. So that's what we're dealing with over here. Got the baby to bed. My husband is on baby duty, so hopefully we can go our hour without being interrupted. I know that Instagram has been having some struggle bus issues, I think, with so many people doing lives lately. So if for some reason I get kicked off, I will be back. So hang in there with me. So gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for joining me. If you are watching this on the replay, thank you for watching. If you don't know me, I'm Steffi. I am an adoptive mama to a now 2-month-old baby girl. My husband and our 4 animals, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and I, and now Eden live in Illinois. I work in marketing full-time, still on maternity leave. I don't go back until early next month. So this has just been this whole quarantine situation has been an interesting time to have a new baby. Let me just put it that way. But we are loving this time with our sweet girl. So my husband and I went through 3 disrupted adoptions before we got to our daughter. So, for that reason, I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I feel like people don't talk about it enough. And I've talked to some of my birth mama friends and some of my adoptee friends, and I think in a lot of adoption education stuff, you hear like, oh yeah, disruptions, they can happen. But you don't really hear a whole lot about what that actually can look like, how to handle that ahead of time. So wanted to talk a little bit about that. I do want to mention that I did a similar video to some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about tonight as a class for Ashley Mitchell at Big Tough Girls new Back to Basics class. So if you're not familiar with Ashley, first of all, you need to go follow Big Tough Girl. I've learned so much stuff from her over the last couple of years. She's amazing. And she has a platform where she offers really amazing adoption education. Way better than what you get through your home study or your agencies or whatever. And Alex and I have done her adoption education, her Back to Basics classes before. She's revamping the platform, and she said that she's hoping to have it live in summer, like around early June. So make sure that you follow along for that. If you are a hopeful adoptive parent or you're like early in your adoption journey, make sure you check that out because there's going to be some awesome stuff on there, including a more comprehensive version of what I'm going to talk about tonight. So that was just a little quick note on that. I also want to make a quick note on language. So I am going to be using the term disruption or disrupted adoption, disrupted placement. I prefer this term to failed match, failed placement, failed adoption. I feel like failed match, failed placement, all that kind of stuff has a super negative connotation, right? The word failure is not a good thing. And so I don't like to use that term because really failure is a matter of perspective. What may feel like a failure to the hopeful adoptive couple is not a failure to that mama who chose to parent, right? So disruption is a little bit more of, it's a little bit, I don't know, I prefer that term a lot. And I know that there are definitely adoptees out there who also do not care for the term failed match, failed adoption, that kind of thing. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're kind of moving forward, and as you're talking to people. Whether they're people just in your life, whether it's your professionals, that sort of thing. So I want to kind of start off by telling our story, so that you kind of know the perspective where we're coming from and where, so here's my credentials for talking about this. So we started our adoption journey 2 years ago, at the very, very end of 2017, beginning of 2018, after struggling with infertility for a couple of years. And that in and of itself is a whole different story. And I actually have a story highlight on my profile with our infertility journey if you're interested in hearing about that. But we started our adoption journey very end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And I am an Enneagram 1. I'm going to mention that probably a couple of times because it's relevant to how my brain works. And paperwork is like my Olympics. And so I powered through that paperwork. And because of that, we were able to be an active waiting family pretty quickly. And so by mid-February or so, we were an officially a waiting family. And we were matched. We were chosen by an expectant mom, I think like 6 weeks after we went live. And like we barely had time to like get our footing. We hadn't really put too much thought into a nursery yet. And you know, we're like, get this call, we've been chosen. We're like, okay, this is happening. And so it's almost a year to be adopted. Yeah, there's a lot of families that takes a lot longer. I am a freak. So they were like, here's all your paperwork. And I was like, all right, this is clearly a competition to see how quickly I can get this done. It was not a competition. It was a competition with myself. Okay. So that's also one of the things no one really tells you when you start the adoption journey is like, or like when you're reading about things, is that really the home study, how long it takes, a lot of that is up to you as to how long you want to draw that out with all the paperwork. I didn't want to draw it out. So anyway, we get this call, we get chosen, and the baby was due about a month later. And it was an interesting situation because it was a closed situation. She did not want any contact with us. We, you know, didn't know any identifying information, all that kind of stuff. And so it was kind of a, in retrospect, kind of a weird situation to be like our first one. And she ended up choosing to parent 5 days before the due date. And again, we didn't have any contact with her directly, and we never, you know, she decided to parent and then she just sort of disappeared. The professionals didn't hear from her again. Obviously, we didn't hear from her again. We never really got to know what happened to her or that baby. So there wasn't really a lot of closure there. And without going into a lot of detail, just it was in and of itself kind of an odd situation. And that situation and just feeling kind of unprepared going into it, even though we'd done the home study, we did the education connected to it. That in the couple of months following that, I just really felt like I needed to learn more. And that's actually what led me to find Ashley on Instagram, and then Kelsey from Another Mother, and Kindred & Co. and Adopt Well, and these profiles that have really helped me learn and grow and feel more equipped and ready to adopt, and really learn more about the expectant mamas and what they go through, and just feel more prepared for our next situation. So it was almost a full year before we were chosen again. So the first one was at the very beginning of 2018. Second one was almost exactly a year later, at the end of February of 2019. And that one we again had about a month. Ended up being a little bit over a month before the baby was born. And that mama, she wanted contact with us. And so that was our first experience having contact with the expectant mama. And she and I texted every day. We did, FaceTime, and really got to know each other and really developed a friendship. We were at the hospital with her. We didn't make it in time for the delivery, but we spent, those couple days there with her. We did not have a room in the hospital. We had a hotel room. The baby stayed with her in the hospital room that night. And because of the timing, so the state that it was a baby boy, because of the timing of when termination of parental rights would happen, when signing would happen, and when he was born during the week, if he had been born earlier in the day, signing would have happened like Friday afternoon, but he was born really late on a Tuesday night, I guess. And so signing wasn't going to happen until Monday morning. And hospital discharge happened late on Thursday. And the mama chose for him to be discharged to us. So we left with him, went to first the hotel that first night, and then an Airbnb, and had him that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday she chose to parent. And I won't go into the details of why. That's not really my story to tell. But that Monday she chose to parent. And so we got the call around 1:00 in the afternoon. And at 4:00, we took him back to the lawyer's office and handed him back to his mama, which was a really terrible experience. It was really, really hard. And that whole experience really, Anya decided to be brave. Look at her. Oh, Anya, you're such a brave girl. She decided the tripod wasn't so scary. Taking him back to his mother was, and she was his mother. I was not his mother. We were not his parents. He was not ours. But taking him back to his mother was really terrible and really hard. And it was interesting because I was messaging with a few of my birth mama friends during that time. And it's hard when you want to, when you're a one and you want to, be morally superior all the time and you really want to do things well. It was hard for me to say, this is so hard for me, when I knew, if it's so hard for me to hand back a baby who wasn't even mine, how hard is that for a mama to sign her rights over and to hand over a baby that is hers? And my friends were very gracious, and they were like, it's it's not a shitty life competition. Like, it's not a shitty situation competition. Like, what you went through is really horrible and hard. And, you know, what we go through is really horrible and hard. And those things can all, like, they can all be really hard. And so that was some, like, definite, like, grace that I was extended to, like, it's okay to feel heartbroken, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So the happy ending to that story is, a few weeks after we came home, I was just really missing his mama, because the connection that we had formed via text before the baby was born, but then, just the connection that we had in the hospital, like, I just felt so strongly for her and loved her so much. And I really genuinely missed her. Like, I missed the baby, but I really missed her. And so I sent her a text and I was like, would you like to be friends? And then I, like, put the phone down and, like, walked away. It's like when you were, like, a teenager and you, like, text a boy, like, I like you. Like, oh my God, what are they gonna say? And she, you know, texted back and she was like, I miss you too. I would love to be friends. And long story short, she actually asked us to be the baby's godparents. And so we are in his life and we get to see him grow up, and we text all the time, and I get pictures of him. And she and I actually took a little trip in July. They live in Michigan, we live in Illinois, and Michigan City, Indiana was about halfway between where we live. And so I rented an Airbnb this summer, and she and I and the baby spent a couple days there together. And they came and stayed at our house for like 2.5-3 weeks in September. And it's just a really beautiful relationship that we've built. And she's a really, really wonderful mother. She's one of the best mamas I've ever met. And he's absolutely where he's supposed to be. And they're doing so well. I know that there's been a lot in this last year. He just turned a year old last week. And I know there's been a lot of things in this last year that have been really hard for her. But I know that she is doing such a good job, and I'm so proud of her. And I love them so much. So we were then again chosen at the end of November, right before Thanksgiving. And this time it was 2 months. Again, the mama wanted to get to know us beforehand. And so again, spent a couple months texting with her pretty much every day, getting to know her. And that baby was born in New Jersey. She was born on a Monday afternoon. The mama went into labor. We like hopped in the car. Sorry. Okay. I turned off my Wi-Fi. I'm making it use my data. Okay. Sorry for that. So the baby was born Monday. We drove through the night to New Jersey. We met everyone on Tuesday in the hospital. And then Wednesday they decided to parent. And that was before we, were there in the hospital with them that day. They decided to parent. And so then Thursday we went home. Drove back home. That was it was a 14-hour drive. It was a long drive to make home after another really hard disappointment. So that was, if you're keeping track, our third one. That was towards the end of January. And at that point, I'm not gonna lie to you, we were feeling really drained. We were feeling really, really, really drained, really downtrodden, really feeling like it was never gonna happen for us. And then 17 days later, I was getting a manicure on a Saturday afternoon, and I got a phone call, and they said, there's a mama in labor, and she's chosen you. I said, you're shitting me. And the caseworker said, I would never shit you. And 5 hours later, we were in Wisconsin in the delivery room with watching this beautiful baby girl be born, and she's now our daughter. So, and it's, you know, it's interesting, the day before that, I was like so heartbroken, and I was just feeling really, really discouraged. And, you know, I've girlfriends that are watching right now that can tell you that, Anya, girl, you need to move your butt. That can tell you, like, the day before was messaging them, and I was like, I just, like, I don't know how this is going to happen for us. And then there it was. So now we have our Edie girl. Do the biological families get any kind of counseling during their journeys? All right, I will talk about that here in a little bit. I'll try to remember to come back to that. So that's our story. I have a few things that I want to cover. First, if you are in the adoption journey, you need to read The Girls Who Went Away. I know it's backwards for you, but you need to read The Girls Who Went Away. It is about the women between the end of World War II and the passing of Roe v. Wade who placed children for adoption. They were, you know, this is during what they call the baby scoop era. Women were sent to maternity homes. They were coerced into placing their children. They were told that they weren't fit to parent. They didn't deserve these babies. They didn't deserve to grieve their babies. They didn't even deserve to think about their babies. They should just go home and forget about it. And it talks about the stories of these women. And it's really, really powerful. And I think it's a really important book for everyone to read because it's a really important historical piece of the adoption industry that we are living today. And because there are pieces of this that still exist today. I was talking to someone the other day who had an encounter with an expectant mother who is living in a maternity home just like this. And she was basically told, like, if you decide not to place your baby for adoption, you have to get out and you don't have anywhere to live. I also think it's written by an adoptee. Yes, Claire, it is written by an adoptee. It is. So, you know, as much as we want to think that these maternity homes are a thing of the past, they are not. They still exist. And we're still shaking off a lot of the things that are talked about in this book. So, pick up this book. I'm not going to tell you it's an easy read, like, emotionally, because it's not. But the chapters are not super long. So it is pretty easy to read, like, a chapter or two at a time and then put it down. I'm a pretty quick reader. It took me like a year to get through this book just because it's really heavy. And so I would read a few chapters at a time and then I would put it down and kind of process it and then come back to it. So go check it out. Get it on Amazon. Love Amazon right now. Love Amazon all the time. Let's be real. Okay. So a few things I want you to know about disruptions. I think the big thing, and this has been, this has weighed on me for a while, is the more ethically we do adoption, the more likely disruptions are to happen. Because when we do adoption ethically, we are making sure that the mamas know what their choices are, that they understand that just because they have chosen an expectant family does not mean that they have to place their child for adoption. We are making sure that mamas know that, you know, just because a family has met this baby, or just because a family has taken a baby home, if they haven't signed those papers yet, they can still choose to parent. And so Anya's like sighing behind me. And so when we're doing things ethically, those are all pieces that we're making sure these expectant parents understand. And by nature, that means that we're more likely to experience a disruption. But we have to be okay with that, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to tell our children that we did this well, that we weren't coercing, that we weren't, that we treated their birth parents and their birth families with as much love and grace as we possibly could. And that, if that means that our hearts might be broken along the way, then that's what we're doing. And if that's not something that you feel comfortable with, please don't adopt. Just don't do it. I know that that's probably a really hard thing to hear, because the fear of a disruption is so great. It seems so scary, and it's not fun. It's not. I've done it 3 times. None of them have been fun. This is not like, I think I want to do that again. But if you're not prepared to really do this well, then you have to be prepared for that to happen. And I also want you to understand that disruptions can happen even if there are no red flags. I get a lot of questions about like, well, what are some red flags for disruptions? And I don't like answering that question, because first of all, I think it differs, but also we've been in 2 situations, these last 2, where for the professionals, like from their side, they did not see any red flags. And yet both of those mothers chose to parent. And I've also heard of situations where there were tons of, quote, red flags, and those mothers chose to place their children. So I think when we look at that as like red flags, yes, we were told there were no red flags for all 4 of our disruptions. Exactly. So I think when we like listen to the professionals, they're like, oh, no red flags. This is almost a for sure thing. Like, do not, just don't listen to that. Sometimes it isn't until we give birth that we decide absolutely. And I think that was especially the case in the last one. They basically said like, this is a whole lot harder than we thought it was going to be. Like, there was a difference for them between like this hypothetical baby, and then when this baby was in their arms, like, oh my gosh, like this is a whole different situation. So looking at things in terms of red flags or not, I think is I think it's really hard and pretty much impossible to like lay things out in that cut and dry of a way. So it's important to just go into each situation and just take the facts of that situation and know that there are some things that may make an open adoption hard in the future. Like, there are, situations that are tough, and there are situations that are going to be really hard to explain to your child down the road. And there are things that can like factor into the adoption itself, but in terms of whether they're going to place, those things may or may not be a factor. So when you go into a situation, if there's a lot of like difficult things about it, be prepared more for like how you are going to handle that down the road with your child, and be less concerned about, does this mean she's going to parent or not? Because there's really no way to know until she's either signing the papers or she's not. Okay, I asked for questions before I did this, and I have a couple of questions that wanted to know how to handle the period between when you're matched and the baby is born and the papers are signed. So a few things I want you to do during a match. The first is you have to remember that this baby is not yours yet. And as a hopeful adoptive parent, that's like one of the hardest pills to swallow, is that no baby is yours until the papers are signed. It's just, they're not. Or until the revocation period is over, depending on what state you're in. Every state's different, so paper signed, revocation period's over, differs. But that baby's not yours yet. And this how you reconcile that in your mind is going to differ from person to person and family to family, right? Everybody's a little bit different. For us, like, I am the kind of person that I just like really needed to have a nursery ready. But even though we knew, and, oh, where's my sweet husband? Sorry if I'm creeping. Yeah, babe, you're a creeper. I needed a nursery to be ready, like when we brought home a baby. But our nursery, even though with a couple of the matches, we knew what the sex of the baby was, our nursery is gender neutral. And until we brought her home, it wasn't until we brought Eden home that I started adding things that were a little bit more girly. I've got some things that are gonna have her name on them, but I didn't do any of that until like she was home and she was ours. So gender neutral, registering for things that were gender neutral, all that kind of stuff, like preparing for a baby as opposed to a specific baby. Does that make sense? And also one of the things, a question that I got was, how do you love well while still maintaining distance to like minimize your own potential hurt? One of the things that Alex and I learned was not to tell our families. So did you guys do a baby shower? We did have a baby shower during the first match, but it was gender neutral, and we left it very like, it was not for a specific baby. Everything was very gender neutral. We didn't talk about any of that because we needed to have the stuff, right? But we didn't want to make it for that specific baby in case something happened. So for us, even though like I in particular was talking to the mamas every day and was really getting to know them, and our hearts were invested, particularly on the last one before Eden, we did not tell our families actually until we were home after everything happened. We told basically our employers knew, our coworkers knew, for logistical reasons. And a couple of very, very close friends knew, and some of my adoption friends here on Instagram knew, and that's it. Because we learned that, particularly with the second one, with our now godson, it was a really hard balance of like handling our own grief and everything happening, and like trying to keep our families updated, and we're also like worrying about them in that moment, and it was really, really, that was hard. And it was almost a little bit easier with the third one, to not have to keep people updated. Like we had a few people that knew, and we were able to like text them, but they knew like if they weren't hearing something, and no news was no news. Versus like when it's grandparents who so desperately want a grandbaby, or aunts and uncles or whomever, that are like a little bit more impatient for information. It was hard. It was easier to not have to keep everyone updated. And again, like we told them afterwards, what happened, but for us and the relationships that we have and how much we knew that our parents wanted this grandbaby and all this stuff, it was just easier to not share that stuff with them. And again, like every family is going to be different. And it might be that you have certain family members that you can tell and certain family members that you can't. And it just, I think the fewer people that you tell, the fewer people that you have to update as things are happening. But also don't keep it completely to yourself. Like, you'll explode. Find your safe people. Find if it's, you know, your very best friend, or if you have adoption friends, like my fellow adoptive mamas, you know, a couple of my birth mama friends, like, they get it. And so for them, it was a whole lot easier to tell them because I didn't have to explain everything, and I didn't have to explain why I wasn't telling our family. Like, they just knew. So find your people and find those people you can confide in, because otherwise your brain's going to turn to smush. So there's just a whole lot that you do need to process. Also, y'all, I think everyone should be in therapy. But if you are going through the adoption process, get your ass to therapy. Just go find a therapist and do it. Like, you need a therapist. I'm gonna tell you that right now. They're gonna be your best friend through all of this. It'll make your life a whole lot better to have a therapist to talk to. So the other thing I want you to do during a match is to avoid coercive language. And again, if you read The Girls Who Went Away, you will understand the importance of this, even more so, of what the ramifications of coercion and coercive language can look like. But again, like, even little things like not referring to her as the birth mama until she has signed, you know, making sure that she understands that, like, you know, that she can choose to parent at any time and that you're going to support her. Just, there's little things like that along the way that can make a big difference, in not coercing her into making a decision, but then also helping her to understand that you love her and that you value her, not as a vessel through which you can become a parent, but as a human being. And like, that's so important. I think that birth parents know that they're valued as their own people and not like, oh, well, I made you a parent and that's the only reason that you value me. Like, hell no. We love Eden's birth parents because they're fucking awesome people, not just because they birthed her. Avoid coercive language. And if you follow people like Big Tough Girl from Another Mother, Adopt Well, Kindred & Co., they're talking all the time about how, you know, what some of that language looks like, how to avoid some of that. So definitely follow along some of those accounts, because they've got lots of great information on all of that stuff. And then if you are invited into that hospital space, it's a very, very sacred space. I have a lot that I could say about the hospital. But what I will say for now is be prepared to advocate for mama at the hospital. If you need to. You may not need to. She may have a great support system. You may be at a great hospital. Our daughter was born at a wonderful hospital with nurses that were great with her parents and with us and everything. But we've been in hospital situations where they weren't great with adoption, and they were coming to us, you know, with our godson. Like, they were coming to us to ask us, like, oh, well, do you want to circumcise him? And that really wasn't our decision yet. And Alex was the one that was like, I think we should ask his mother this question, and see what she thinks. Because it really, what she decided was what should be done, because she was still his mother. So just be prepared, that to advocate for her if you need to at the hospital. Don't, you know, obviously don't overstep, but also don't just sit back and let them treat the mother in a not great way. Because there are definitely My son was born at a military hospital that didn't believe in adoption. It was horrible for our birth mama. Yeah, that's unfortunately really common. And so I think it is really important to just watch for that stuff. Sometimes when you get into a situation, when you're matched, you'll usually know where the mama is going to be delivering, and sometimes the professionals will have some insight on how adoption friendly that hospital is. And so sometimes you can know going into it, like you may need to advocate more for her, but it's also sometimes they don't know. And so just be prepared, watch for things, you know, if they're using language that isn't really very positive, like just be prepared to step in. If they're defaulting to asking you for all of the permissions and everything, like pivot back to the birth mama, because she is the parent still until those papers are signed. All of those decisions are hers. And so just be prepared. Like they, you know, the hospital may say like, oh, well, we'll send the baby with you for the night, and ask if she wants that time. She's not going to choose to parent because you gave her too much time in the hospital, you guys. Like, let her hold the baby as much as she wants. Let that baby stay in her room if she wants. If she wants alone time, let her have that time. That's her time. And if she wants to spend the time with you guys, that's great. But let that be her decision. And be prepared to walk into that room and let that, you know, offer that to her. So I'm living for my husband's commentary in the comments. So just be prepared. If you are invited into that space, it is super sacred, and give us 3 days, you will have a lifetime. Yes, actually, they get this little tiny chunk of time, and we get the rest of our lives if they sign those papers. So be gracious, have a big heart with that time, and just really think about things from her perspective, and it'll bring you to your knees. That hospital will bring you to your knees. Okay. I got a lot of questions. I've got about 15 minutes left. I got a lot of questions about grief and grieving, and how to grieve. So this is important because, again, like, I think when you want to do this well, you find yourself in a space of like, do I get the right to grieve? This wasn't my baby. So do I get the right to grieve? And the short answer is yes, you do. You absolutely have the right to grieve. And it is really hard because, like, again, I'm an Enneagram 1. I have this like, okay, I gotta do everything, gotta do it right, I gotta be ethical. And I'm like, this wasn't my baby. Is it okay if I feel sad and if I feel heartbroken? Yeah, it's totally okay. And again, like, I keep talking about my birth mama friends, but they're some of my favorite people on the planet. So I talk about them a lot. And they're the ones that were like, yes, you can grieve. You have experienced a loss. Like, you went into this and you prepared your heart for a baby, and it's okay to be sad and heartbroken. And you can support a mom's decision to parent and still grieve. Like, those things are not mutually exclusive. Just because you are sad and grieving for yourself doesn't mean that you don't support her right to choose to parent. And doesn't mean that you're not doing this well. So just remember that multiple things, you can experience multiple things at the same time, right? Like, you can support her and be sad for yourself. Those things can coexist. And I am unfortunately kind of a pro at the grieving process. If anyone does not know, my mom passed away going on 3 years ago. And we've experienced a number of losses since then in our, deaths in our family, and then these disrupted adoptions and all of these things. And my therapist has helped me really learn like how to grieve, and the grieving process is not linear. People talk about the stages of grief, and that's bullshit. Like, we talk about the stages of grief as if there's like a linear pattern to them, and there is not. They happen all at once. They happen in random orders. Some of them never happen. It's the whole thing. And for me, the most important thing that I have learned is to let your grief take you where it's going to. It's going to be weird. Grief is weird. Some days you're going to be totally fine, and some days, for no reason at all, you're just going to be a complete and utter wreck. And some days you're going to take a look at your home office and you're going to say, I hate the color of these walls. I need to repaint my office. This is a real thing that happened like 2 months after my mom died. I was like, I'm repainting my office, and Alex came home from work and I had bought a gallon of paint and I was repainting my office. He was like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing today. It's just completely bonkers, and you have to write it, and you have to just let your grief do what it's gonna do. And some days it's gonna be weird, and some days it's gonna be sitting on your couch eating a pint of ice cream, crying over a movie, and some days you're gonna be fine. But just roll with it, and don't try to force it. Don't try to like make your grief be something that it's not. And just remember, it is okay to grieve. A couple of questions that we got. One was, how did you keep on trying? I don't know. You guys, sometimes I don't know. By the time we got to the number 3, I was like, we genuinely didn't know how much more we could take. And we just had to believe, and try not to pass judgment on people when they're grieving and how they work through it. Yes, absolutely. If somebody you know is grieving and they're doing some weird shit, roll with it. Be like, hey, what do you need? Do you need me to be weird with you? I'll be weird with you. I'll whatever you need. But I think, we just had to keep believing that it was going to happen. And there were a lot of days I couldn't believe it. There were a lot of days that I just couldn't hold the hope for myself. And I had a support system of people who were holding the hope for me. I've got girlfriends who said, when you cannot hope, I will hope for you. And honestly, like, that helped me a lot. Like, on days when I was just like completely in the depths and ditches of like, this is never gonna happen, I had my girlfriends who are like, I see you and I love you and I'm gonna hold the hope for you. So like, find that support system, because that support system is gonna get you through all of it. You have to have your support system. I saw my friend Addie just asked, any advice you give to people on medical teams who are supporting people in the triad? I think that's a really great question. If you are a labor and delivery nurse, God bless you, first of all. Love nurses. Second of all, I would read this book. And I would really follow along and educate yourself on adoption, educate yourself on positive adoption language, and educate yourself to remember that this is a very delicate situation, even more so than most, labor and delivery situations are going to be. and because there's going to be added people if the adoptive parents are there and all of these things. And can you make a post about that book? Yes, I have one from a while ago. I will reshare it after I get off of this. Hopefully I remember. But just, if you are in the medical field, and in there, like, just remember that those birth parents, they are the parents, until the law says otherwise. So respect that, respect them, like, just give them the utmost love and attention. But then, they may also want to involve the hopeful adoptive parents, and respect that as well. So just really educate yourself on that. And it'll make you a better human, but also, like, chances are good you are going to experience an adoptive situation at some point. And I can tell you from our experience with Eden in the hospital, like, it was a positive experience, in great part due to the nurses and how wonderful they were to all of us. And I think that her birth mama would say the same. We've talked about the nurses and how amazing they were. One of the biggest lessons for me was learning to call mamas expectant mamas and not birth mamas until after placement was finalized. Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a few more minutes. Somebody asked, how do you demand that an agency support the mom after a decision to parent? And, boy, you guys, this is a hard one, because unfortunately, agencies providing support to mamas who've decided to parent is going to be in the vast minority. I do know that there are professionals who do. Ashley has talked about some of them before, but unfortunately, finding a professional that is gonna, like, and not just like lip service, but actually support, like, provide resources and support for a mother who's decided to parent, is going to be in the minority. And I think that's something, I think that's an important question that you can add to, like, as you're researching professionals and you're, interviewing professionals, basically. That's a question to ask. The other thing to ask them, or to watch out for, I have seen professionals who brag about very, very, very low disruption rates. Like, 99% of our situations are successful, blah, blah, blah. First of all, I could go on a rant about this, but I only have 6 more minutes. First of all, I think they're lying. Second, so they're either lying or they're doing something real sketch to make sure that that rate stays that low. Either way, do you want to work with a professional that is either A, flat out lying to you, or B, doing something super sketchy to make sure that those mamas place? I hope the answer is no. So if you encounter a professional that is boasting about super low disruption rates, I want you to take a real good hard look at that and really think about if that's somebody that you want to work with, because boy. I'm from Ontario, and it seems mandatory here for private adoption agencies to provide birth families counseling during pregnancy and post. Yeah, I can't speak, obviously I'm not from Canada, so I can't speak to, I mean, that would be amazing if that's a thing in Canada. It'd be a step ahead of us here. Because a lot of times you'll see that adoption professionals are saying, like, oh yes, we provide counseling, but it's like an option and it's not really, like, great. Ashley talks a lot about this with her post-placement programs and support for that Need a Knee does for birth parents. But a lot of agencies are not necessarily providing resources for parents or for mamas to really decide if they want a parent, or to feel like they really have the resources to parent if they want to. So that's all that's all stuff that you can think about and look at when you're researching professionals. And stuff that you can keep in mind is like how they talk about disruptions, how they talk about like, okay, what happens if a mother decides to parent, like how they talk about those things will kind of inform how they're going to handle that. And then obviously like read all those contracts, read your contracts, guys. I put together contracts at work all the time for different things and just in my job. And there's a whole like contracts are a starting point for negotiation in a lot of areas. But like really take a look at their contracts, because they're gonna try to sneak stuff in there. I've seen this happen at work. I've seen it happen all over the place. Like people will be like, oh, they're not gonna read the fine print, they'll sneak some stuff in there. Like really read your contracts before, don't just sign them. Like take a look at what's actually in them and push back. Like don't be afraid to push back on stuff. And then the other thing, and this was another question, was like, how did we afford to keep going back? And we were working with some professionals that we were not out money if we went through disruptions. So that helped a lot, working with professionals who, or it was very smaller amounts of money. And so in the specific states, like working with the representation, the lawyers for like the expectant parents and stuff, most of them had like smaller retainers up front, and the majority of their fees weren't due until signing, which was extremely helpful. I personally tend to be a little bit wary of professionals that are wanting thousands of dollars up front and then there's absolutely no way to get any of that money back if she decides to parent. And I'm wary of that because I think that makes it harder for you to have grace if she decides to parent. And I think it leaves the door open for things to be a little bit more coercive, if that makes sense. Like if you know I'm out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, like it's going to be a lot harder for you to not be coercive. Okay, I've got my 2-minute warning. So I may come back and do more about this, at another point. Thank you for sitting with me. Thanks for talking about this. Let's keep the conversation going, in, stories. Again, a more comprehensive version of this is going to be in Ashley's Back to Basics class that'll hopefully be available this summer. So please take a look at that. And I love you guys for sitting in this conversation with me. I know that this is not like exactly a fun topic, and it's kind of scary as hopeful adoptive parents to think about this, but I think it is so important. And I'm really happy that you all were here with me and want to learn about it and learn how to do this well. So love you guys. Have a great night, and I will figure out how to put this up to watch for the next 24 hours. So love you guys.